So this is I've been trying to think about like what number business this is, because between the last video, which was, which one was it? Autotill, and now, you would have heard if you'd watched a few of the other videos, I'd started writing in a book. So at this point in time, I'd probably planned out 100 businesses or maybe more. So you couldn't say this was the 100th business, but you couldn't say it was the 6th business. It was somewhere in between, and it was not long after Autotill, because the obvious thing with Autotill was we just didn't have the money. And even if the bank had lent us the 400 million or whatever it was to work out with, we were so out of our depth that it wouldn't have made a difference anyway. We needed not just the bank funding, we needed business funding. And we just didn't know how to do it. And at the time, the early 2000s, I would have said, I think 2006 was around the time this was. Funding or venture capital funding in Australia was non-existent for anything that wasn't a really serious business. And what I mean by that is you had to have existing contacts. You needed to be able to get good quality funds. You needed to have friends in high places. You just didn't go and get funding. You needed to know really wealthy people. Bank funding was probably just as likely on a credit card, was probably more likely than ever getting private equity. And it was certainly available overseas, but there was no angels that you could just go and contact. None that we were aware of, especially where we were, which was in Brisbane, Australia. And so we thought to ourselves, what about if we came up with an idea that allowed everyday people to invest in these sorts of businesses? What if we, democratized venture capital funding? There was no angel funding. We didn't have that concept at that time, and it was a really interesting thought process. It was so outside the realms of anything that we'd ever heard of before. This was well before places like Kickstarter or anything like that. And we thought it was genius, But the biggest challenge about it was communication. So how do you communicate with your customers? That was what we knew would be a big challenge, because you needed to be able to keep them up to date. And we didn't know of a platform for that. So we designed that. And you're going to start to see, as we learn new things, ticking off that next box of what we missed in the previous business. And, this business is called Lightbulb Effect. We even bought the domain name. We never bought Autotill domain name. We didn't get that far, but we bought Lightbulb Effect. And the idea was, you have a light bulb, and now the effect is, success, finance, all those sorts of things. And so we realized that it was the platform we needed to develop. So we knew that there was a communications platform. You needed to be able to create a project. You put your project on there, you communicate, you advertise your project, and now you've got a viable business. And we looked at things like, putting your finances details on there and stuff like that. But we really started to tease this out quite strongly, and really started to recognize some of the important parts about what it takes for someone to invest in a business that they don't have day-to-day control of. You could quickly see that anyone who put up a business on this could just do it where they wanted to put up their business and get cash and then run off. So we needed to solve those sorts of problems, and they were challenging, but at the same time they were sensational. Like we worked out things like tranching the payouts. So let's just say, for instance, you went for $1 million, you raised the $1 million. How would we make money was another question that sort of dovetailed into some of this stuff. And we wanted to make money without it being frictionless. And so you could see things where you needed to tranche it. So you raised the $1 million, but you only need 200 grand for the first lot. So we pay out the 200, and you've got milestones that you need to fulfill on, and they're in the system. So you fulfill on those milestones. The customers, the people who invested, can see it. They then get to that point where they say, okay, this is what we've created. We've fulfilled this. We've had a meeting, for instance, we're communicating with shareholders. And then the shareholders agree, okay, next tranche. And the shareholders know that when they release that next tranche, at worst case, they're going to get their 600 grand back. Whatever, or 60% of the money they put up. They've lost 40% of it because they issued the first 200 and then they issued the second 200. And we would make money by putting that leftover cash to sit in an account that collected interest, at 3 or 4%, with banks. So it was risk, essentially as riskless as you can get. We really went to town on this business. It really taught us about how you would raise capital, how you'd allocate capital. And one of the things that we saw was that if we'd had infinite capital, that would have been a really bad idea. Because if we'd had infinite capital, we wouldn't have known what we didn't know. We wouldn't have had to been forced to see things that we hadn't seen. And we wouldn't have allocated that capital effectively. With infinite capital, we could have spent it on whatever the hell we wanted, because we didn't really have anyone around us that was capable of providing this guidance. So it would have been Jason and I. Light bulb effect was Jason and I forgot to say that to start off with. And that was probably one of the best realizations out of light bulb effect. Now, how we would fund light bulb effect was using exactly the same system. So the first business that would be funded off of light bulb effect would be light bulb effect. So we'd use our own infrastructure. And around this time, because I'd been practicing doing these books for a number of years at this point, Jason and I were working together. We'd already worked on Autotill. We were living together at this point in time, in this house that was like slanted at the top. The water leaked into the floor below from the bathroom. Like everything we had was like mismatched. I think at this point in time, I'd almost burnt it down by putting oil on the stove and then getting distracted. And I think I set alight my best jeans because I was trying to put out the fire. There was all this stuff happening. So we were really learning fast, and we realized that the next step, which a lot of businesses do not do, but we knew we had to do because this business is designed in such a way that we had to do it, was that we needed to go out and find people who wanted to invest in our business. And what that needed to do was we needed to pitch this idea to people and see what they thought. So we went out and got an NDA created. I think we spent like $2,000, which was a huge amount of our money. And got everyone, we invited 40 people to our house, a whole bunch of them came. We got them all to sign NDAs, which was really dumb. We should never have done that. It was a bad idea. No one was ever going to steal our idea. An idea isn't worth a lot. You can see the value. Like I could certainly see the value. Jason could see the value, but none of the people we were inviting were ever going to steal it, even if they had the means. And a few of them did. Anyway, so we did the presentation on this LCD TV that I'd purchased for $2,800. It was 26 inches. It was massive in comparison to any other LCD screen at the time. And a guy quite literally got out his checkbook and wrote us a $10,000 check right there and then and just gave it to us. And we took the money, and Jason and I just didn't know what to do. I don't think, well, actually looking back now, I knew we didn't know that people were going to say yes to this. And I'm not even sure why we were shocked. I think that it was a bit of we weren't prepared for that sort of outcome. We weren't sure what the hell we would do next. I think we'd gotten as far as, let's pitch it, but we never thought, if we pitch it, what do we do then? And if we pitch it and we don't get enough money, then what do we do? Do we pitch it again? Or is the idea no good? Was the idea good? You know, and so there was a lot of questions we just hadn't even thought to ask, because I don't think that I'd ever considered that someone would hear a pitch, pull out their checkbook and write a check right there and then. And 10 grand back then was, you know, I think Jason and I were paying ourselves. We'd earn money, we'd squirrel that money away, and we'd pay, I think we paid ourselves $26,000 a year, so $500 a week. And that covered all of our expenses. My expenses were covered by $500 a week, and I think Jason's were too. So we were literally at, you know, $1,000 a week across this household, running all this stuff, and we were squirreling away on our money and living on bulk cooked foods in this deep freezer we bought off of Gumtree. We'd freeze these meals in there. So that's where we got to, and then we stopped. It was like we were frozen. We'd never pitched a business that had gotten that quick attraction that quickly. And we certainly could have pulled it off, but there was a few things that stopped us other than the fact that we just weren't quite sure how to proceed. And one of them was that it was illegal to do what we wanted to do. I think at the time in Australia, it was only legal for 20 people to own a company. And so we tried to solve that problem by creating trusts which owned the shares, and those trusts were then issued shares from a unit trust, which I think could definitely have more than multiple shareholders, more than 20 shareholders, and therefore we could get around it. But we were really concerned, well, what happens if we build this business, we give this money out and someone sues us? You know, we're standing on shaky legal ground. We could have millions of dollars in our own accounts, you know, that were ready for businesses. And those businesses could potentially sue us. There's just this, you know, to stop us from being able to force us to issue the money, to take the money away from us, to end us. Like, we put ourselves we realized that we were in a very potentially legal minefield, and then the government could sue us. You know, so the Australian Securities Investment Commission could sue us. And that is never good, to get sued by a government. And we didn't have the money. We probably needed a couple of $100 grand just in legal fees, just to get very clear about the legal ramifications, and to have some money aside if we did get sued, so we could shore ourselves up legally. And that stopped us. That was the other thing, you know, that we weren't prepared for the money, and we weren't prepared for the legality of it. But what we knew was that this was certainly a path forward. Certainly going to happen in the future. And I think the other one that stopped us too was that there was other ideas that were happening at the same time that we knew we could pull off. And I'm obviously going to talk about those, and that didn't have the legal issues, didn't have, you know, the other issues that were involved in it. But if we'd had, you know, what we made the mistake on was that if we'd gone out and looked for more money, we would have got it. I think that Lightbulb Effect was probably our first viable business that could have turned into quite a successful company and produced quite a decent amount of income for us. And could have definitely gone global, because this was before all those Kickstarters and all the other ones that have sprung up today. And what fascinates me is that we were ahead of the game. Like, we built this before others did. So we could have, you know, quite literally created quite a great global company. But it just goes to show you, you know, what can stop you. And sometimes it's success, and sometimes it's legals. But looking back now, if I'd had my time again, knowing what I know now, back then, I would have definitely gone for it. I would have gone out and continued to pitch this idea. I think investors would have really loved it. They would have seen the potential for this. And we would have definitely got the legal, you know, support. We could have gone out to a lawyer and said, you know, found lawyers who would help us out, or found investors who would pay. And we would have definitely created a sensational product. We probably would have created too many features to provide more certainty. I mean, Kickstarter, there's so many Kickstarters, you put your money up, you never see anything. I think that was a really good route for them to go down, because it's a really clear delineation. We were definitely not going to go down that road. We were definitely in the world of feature creep, and that, you know, would have been a mistake. But I think if we'd gotten that professional advice, they would have, you know, especially the legal advice, they would have said, look, draw the line here and don't go any further. So that would have been fantastic as well. I think that's what there is to share about light bulb effect. There's nothing else on my notes. So hopefully you got something from that. I count light bulb effect as an extreme success, even though we never produced anything other than the domain name and a bunch of, you know, spec work and getting people just writing checks straight up. And this happened all in the course of just a few months. And this was Jason and my's incredibly productive period. You know, him and I had moved in together, you know, we were collaborating every day, we were talking about it every day. You know, there's just that drive. We were just solely focused on this and going to work. We had like real jobs, we needed to pay our bills. But this was the super productive period of our lives, where the ideas just seemed to come, and they were on the money. Like they were right, a great time, you know, as a call for not too far into the future, but not so close that, you know, we were the 12th to invent it, or, you know, there was 5 others at the same time. So it was a really exciting period of our lives, and that's why I called it a success. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.